Welcome back to the Boomerang podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Don Hiatt. He is joining us. He's going to be running as the county recorder here in Maricopa County. Don, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Boomerang podcast.
Thanks. I'm delighted to be here.
You said it was your first interview you've done on the campaign trail?
Yeah, first podcast.
First podcast.
Yes.
I'm honored. So you're running for county recorder, excuse me. You're running for county recorder, and what does that position entail?
So it used to be a boring position, but it's gotten a little more exciting. So the county recorder is responsible for recording documents and deeds and plats and records of property and transactions and all those sorts of things.
Right.
That's one side of the fence. The other half that they're responsible for is maintaining the voter rolls, and then also for early elections. So they manage everything up to the day of elections.
Right.
And then the Board of Supervisors is responsible for day of election and tabulating the results.
Right. So obviously we've had some problems in those areas, to say the least. What I like most about your platform was that you want to get rid of the D-word company machines.
Yeah, I've got some things I can say about them.
Yeah, please tell us. Speak your mind.
Yeah.
Dominion. We're talking about Dominion.
Well, you know, a lot of people keep asking me, if there's evidence, why can't we prove this?
Right.
Right. Well, okay. So first off, my background is technology. I've got 35 years of IT technology management experience. And I actually started my career by selling document management and scanning solutions to recorders' offices. And because they had lots of paper, right? And we would be scanning it and indexing it. So, and they, the recorder's offices, that was where I started my technology background. And so when you start getting into what's going on with machines and tabulators and everything else, I know the insides of systems. I've designed systems, so I understand databases and SQL Server, Management Studio, and
right.
And
Which the average person doesn't.
No, they don't. And so when Tina Peters in Mesa County, Colorado, one of the candidates told her that the candidate had won, and told her by what percentage, and she wasn't finished with the canvas yet.
It wasn't even finished yet.
No.
They came up to her and they told her pretty much the exact.
Yeah, they did. They told her exact number.
Right. We know Tina. We love Tina.
So she they got into it and they looked at the data. And so here's what you can see. When you scan a document, it makes a very large file.
Right.
And when you take pictures of 219-inch or 20-inch ballots, that batch of ballots will take physically 4 to 6 minutes to transfer to the server. And every time it transfers a batch to the server, it makes an entry into the database with the date and timestamp.
Right.
Okay, so fine. Well, what they discovered is there were 2 databases on that system. Now, first off, for somebody to create a second database, they had to be very technically adept.
Right.
Because you have to have permissions and the right accounts and file access permissions in order for the Dominion system to continue to operate normally. Or it would just simply break and not work.
Right.
So somebody got into that system, somebody hacked into that system, and they created the second database, and then they used some of the batches of data from the first database, and they scripted it and wrote it into the second database. So when you look at the batches that arrived in that system, they arrived in milliseconds. 15 milliseconds, 135 milliseconds, which is absolute proof to a technologist like myself that somebody hacked that system and changed the outcome of an election. Now, what they did discover is that they were point shaving. They weren't trying to make just one candidate absolutely, a landslide, but they were trying to do point shaving so that
nice and close, 51 to 49.
Kind of like that.
Right.
But they were, Mesa County is more like a 70-30 county, right?
Right.
And they were trying to make it about a 56-47.
Right.
They were trying to move the needle.
Something believable.
So that over time they could eventually switch it over.
Right. Okay.
So that's to me absolute proof from, a technology standpoint. Nobody can tell me or convince me that system wasn't hacked and wasn't the election outcome wasn't changed.
Unbelievable. Because I listen to guys like Mark Cook, Chris Jersky, right? Mark Cook's
Oh, yeah.
another tech savvy guy. I mean, he knows systems, he knows
Yeah.
engineering, he knows a range of skills.
Yes.
And some of his findings, I haven't heard what you found, but I've heard some of what Mark Cook talks about.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. So it's like, what can you do? And clearly you're standing up. What are you going to do when you get into office? What would be some of the first steps that you would take?
Well, a couple of things. We had real tabulator troubles in the last election. Right. I call it tabulator cleanup on aisle 3. Fusing rollers not hot enough, not enough toner in the printers. I mean, all the different things that went wrong. 20-inch paper with 19-inch ballot images. I mean, that really would affect the scanning and recognition of those ballots. I can't believe that they would recognize, because the system would have to have the ability to shrink and enlarge the image on the fly in order to be able to tabulate the ballot. So you would have to prove to me that the ballots actually were counted properly. So, that's one of the things I'd want to do is also, of course, Michelle Swinick, and she's done a lot of work with the system log files.
Yeah.
And, but she's doing it by hand, right?
Right.
Searching for certain key phrases or words or
Right.
whatnot. But back when I was working for a computer company in the late 70s or early 80s, I wrote a program that was used to calculate the efficiency of 3 different processor architectures. So at the time, there was a Motorola 88,000, which was a RISC-based system. Supposedly, it was going to be better. And then there was the Motorola 6820 was the processor at the time, and it was running about 2 MIPS, 1.8 million instructions a second. And this processor this company built ran at 8 MIPS. And so I used to go to lunch with these designers and say, how do you make it go so fast?
Right.
And they would explain things to me like translation look-aside buffers, and that we do multiple branch predictions so that we don't have to go back and recalculate things.
These are the original voting.
No, this is computers.
Computers.
Just
Okay.
computers.
Got it.
So I mean, I learned an awful lot from these people. But they wanted me to do an analysis of the compiler output of 3 different architectures. And so I ended up using a little tool from the Linux world called awk. It stands for Aho, Weingarten, Kernighan, I think, or somebody. Three developers that wrote the program. But it's great at doing pattern matching and then executing an action. So you can create regular expressions which can match any set of characters. So what Michelle is looking for, we could write regular expressions to search for. But then we could also execute the actions to calculate things and whatnot, update counters and how many ballots went and those kinds of things. And you could literally do that on all of the slog files in a matter of a couple of minutes. So one of the things I'd like to do is to be able to look at those slog files and write this kind of program looking for what's normal.
Right.
Right.
Look for anomalies
And
use technology to the benefit as opposed to the detriment. Right.
Exactly. Use it for the benefit of understanding the normal and then pointing out what's abnormal about this particular tabulator. And I think that would be, and then the other thing too, I don't believe that there should be records requests that you have to do to get data. It
should just be immediately available.
It should
just be out in the open.
If it's available publicly, you can get it.
Right.
We should just publish on the web for people to look at.
Yeah, I mean, these people are public servants.
Yeah.
So
transparency. That's part of the problem. We don't have it.
So is that something you think you would bring to the table, is being able to get that transparency?
I do.
So we're saying you deliver transparency first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of the machines.
Well, I can't guarantee that.
Okay.
That takes the
but maybe maybe use that same technology to after the election to make sure everything in those machines in the first place was kosher.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
What else?
Well, here's the thing. In the 2024 election, it's absolutely going to be a technical election.
Right.
We're going to have scanners, tabulators, software, MiFis, everything, right? And it's just going to be that. So I really think that someone who's a technology-based person will have a very good understanding of all that. I know Mr. Richer has to walk around and say, see the blue cable? It's not connected to anything.
Right.
Well, I don't that
something called
doesn't
Wi-Fi
prove-
or
that
Bluetooth.
doesn't prove that it's not
Right.
connected.
Right. Outrageous. Yeah, that when you listen to that guy speak and then you see the evidence available, you just, and it's like the crazy part is like people fall for this. They just they don't. I think that's really the big problem here, is that the average person is not involved enough in this.
That's correct. I would believe that too.
Right. That's kind of why I like bringing on guests like you and some of these other IT guys, is that like you guys bring the real data to the table. Like to me, what you're talking about for the most part is hieroglyphics, right? You may as well translate it to hieroglyphics so I can understand it. But
somebody out there is going to kind of understand what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Some people will.
And I think, the more people can break it down into simplistic terms. I mean, I think the general public knows that there's something wrong with the elections. And unfortunately, I think this election is going to be done through the machines.
It will be.
Whether we like it or not.
It's going to take a new board of supervisors. The board of supervisors, by resolution, determines the number of vote centers. And we run in 235-ish or somewhere in that range. But, they could easily just determine we're going to have 935 vote centers.
Right.
Which happens to be the number of precincts in Maricopa County.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And then if you're going to do that and you've only got 600 ballots to count, gosh, it might actually be simpler and faster to do a hand count.
Would be. Yeah. Whatever happened to the good old fashioned hand count?
It got obliterated by the D company.
The communists.
Yeah.
The communists. When it comes to 2024, what do you expect to happen in the election? Just more of the same?
Honestly, the gamut. We're not going to have an election because there's some cyber attack. They've been telling that. We're not going to have an election because there's going to be a civil war. That's another message that's out there. If they do have an election, there's going to be no way that they can outvote the public today, in my opinion.
Right.
Because there's been an awful lot of people that woke up, and so they're going to have to try some other way. They tried a COVID, and a virus of the mind, actually.
Virus of the mind.
Yeah.
A hoax.
Yeah.
Do you think RFK Jr. throwing his hat in the race, do you think that'll have some impact on their ability to cheat?
No.
No,
it won't have any impact on their ability to cheat. They'll find some way. There's 1,000 ways they can cheat is the problem. And
so really, we have to get rid of, in order for you to be successful in your position, we would have to get rid of the board of supervisors at the same time and replace them with people that would
not get rid of, but just replace 3 so that there can be a vote that would say, let's do some things differently. Right now you have 5 that are just absolutely taking the mainstream. This is the way we're going to do it. This is the way we always done it. That's the good old Republican way.
Do you think they're paid off?
I'm not going to come out and make a statement like that, but
right, fair enough.
But I can't deny that it sure seems like it.
I heard allegedly that Katie Hobbs is taking payments from the Sinaloa cartel and FTX.
Yep, that's true. That's what I've heard too.
I would love to see if there's some truth to that. How do we find this out? What do we have to do to break through the system? What is it going to take?
It's going to take a hand count.
Hand count.
I believe it. So I usually end my speeches with this phrase. If you want free and fair elections, then your precinct should end the evening with a hand count. And when you do that, you'll be surprised at the outcome of what we've been seeing in the way of elections. I believe that because there's so many ways and so many places that they can inject ballots. One of the biggest problems is the mail-in ballot.
Right.
In 2020, we mailed out 4 million. They said, oh, they're the ones that have the Spanish language translation on them. And he's like, yeah, right. Don't all Microsoft computers come with all languages? Yeah, right. You just flip a switch and then it just everything changes. Yeah,
goes to Chinese, right?
Yeah. So then why are they saying things like that? So I really think that there's a lot of people. I ran into this in my career. You get a lot of developers that try to bamboozle you and try to pull the wool over your eyes. And if you are not a developer,
you wouldn't know.
You can't call their bullshit.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the things that I would have an advantage of is that I'd be able to walk in and listen to people and ask questions. Do you want to discuss the Splunk logs for a minute?
I would love to talk about the Splunk Logs, please.
Well, when Stephen Richer got all the Republicans up in the Maricopa County, and he said, we can't give you the Splunk logs or the routers because it's got the sheriff's network running on it.
Right. Okay. I remember that.
So first off, people need to know what Splunk is. Splunk is a tool that watches the network and it records every packet that goes across the network. And, every packet's got all the identifying information so that you can reassemble it on the other end, or you wouldn't be able to get an email, right? It would be just jumbled garbage.
Right.
So Splunk sees all that and records it. But it's really the greatest strength that it has is filtering. So you say to Splunk, hey, I'd like to look at that election network and nothing else. Or I'd like you to give me a Splunk export log,
right,
so that other people can
isolate certain data.
But I'm not going to include the sheriff's network.
Right.
That's what it can do.
Simple as can be.
Which the other side of the question is why isn't there a Splunk system on the inside of the election network?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, that would be one of the things I would advocate
right.
for. It's like, well, no, we can't tell because we're not monitoring it. Yeah, no kidding. Well, maybe we should. So those are some things. I mean, that's just a simple illustration that, a technologist like myself comes to the party with. So that's a fun thing about the Splunk log. So when I heard that, it was just immediate. Oh, that's BS. They're just saying they don't want to give it to them because they knew they would find something. And that's the suspicion you have. So one of the things that one of my opponents is running around claiming that the biggest problem with the recorder's office is we don't have trust there anymore. And that he'll bring trust to the office.
Oh, good. Great.
But
thank you.
I can agree we don't have trust there because of those kinds of things. Anybody that's on the outside that knows this, they immediately call bullshit on it.
Right.
And so they're bamboozling you and something's wrong. That's all you can conclude. Certainly isn't any transparency. So
what other places besides the Splunk logs, what other places did you see in 2020, 2022? What are some other areas that need to be improved? Or changed completely?
Let me tell you about Runback. How's that sound?
Talk about Runback. Let's do it.
So I had the privilege this PPE election, I think it was March 19th. We did the presidential preference election. I was one of two Maricopa County observers that were allowed to go in and watch the operations at Runback on the night of the election. Okay, so the way things, I'll kind of back up and explain how they do the process. So people come in and they drop their green envelopes in the big bin, right? And then they didn't used to count them. It's akin to I like to say it this way. So let's say you're a great big, company that, you sell gold, right? I bet you get cash sometimes for that, right? So just take those drawers and dump it into a big black bag and put a tie on the top and let the bank count it for you, right? Give me a break.
Yeah.
This is our election and we're treating it with that kind of absurdity.
Right.
So anyways, the Runback doesn't even get to the equation yet. So these bins come from all these locations, and there's actually staging areas where the 235 locations stage down to about 16 or 18 areas. And then they gather everything up and put it in those vehicles, and then they take it over to MamCheck, where they then start processing. These green envelopes come in, they're just all jumbled up, and they get them sorted out into trays. So, and they all have a yellow bar on the right-hand side of it, so you can know when the orientation is right, front, back, and that end or whatever. So you get them all in these trays, and then they estimate 250 per tray or 300 per tray or whatever it is, somewhere in that range. And then they put them on a rack that's got these kind of bars across it, and they lock it.
They put it on a rack, they don't send it to Iraq, right?
No.
Okay.
They put it on a metal rack, a wire rack, and then they lock it up with these bars, and then they say we're sending over 14 trays, and then they fill out their chain of custody document and proudly put that information on there. And then they roll it, and Oscar rolls it onto the truck, and then Oscar works for the county, and he drives it over to Runback, and when he gets there, he backs up and it dings on the inside, and so everybody knows to go over to the back door and open the door, and then Oscar opens the back door, and they roll this tray out, right? This wire rack out. Yeah, 14, it's what it says, right? And then they take it over to a machine. And this machine is a sorter. And it's used to sort a lot of different things. I'll get into a few of the different categories and you'll understand it. So they at the front end of the machine, it's probably about close to as wide as this room is. It's about 6 or 8 feet wide. And it's got a big flat area where you can put a whole bunch of ballots on it and get them all squared up. And it's got an arm that keeps putting pressure on it as they fly into the machine. And they turn these bins over, the trays over, and then, make sure they're lined up, and then they start to run in the batches. Well, the barcode on the green envelope, the ballot affidavit envelope, has a lot of information in it. Who it is, we know whose ballot has been received, not how they voted, just who. So that's how they're going to do the ballot chasing efforts, right? You turned in your ballot, and they can tell that. Then there's also, a variety of other information, the races and everything else. And so they then start flying through this machine, and they fly hundreds per minute. I mean, maybe more. It's about 10,000 an hour. So it's hundreds they're just flinging through this thing. And it's got these little fingers that will pop out and put it down this tray or this row. There's 4 rows, or the bottom row, or the middle row, or the top row. And then they have more of those fingers further down. They've got about, I'm going to say 50 or 60 stations down there for outsorting. And so they sort all these ballot envelopes into the various categories that they want them into. And then they take them from there and they put them back into trays. And they stay closed. Some people think that Runbeck opens the ballots, opens the envelopes and takes the ballots out. They don't. They stay in the trays, and then after they're finished with their counts and whatnot, and outsorting the categories they want, they take and roll these trays into their vault, which is under camera. It's a big room, and it's got halon protection in case of a fire or whatever. But the whole thing is designed to appear secure, and on the surface it kind of looks secure. And I can't really see any major problems or areas where people are rolling extra things in, but we don't get to watch those cameras either because that's a private company. So that's one of the problems. And there's another way I think we can get around that too. But anyway, so on these ballot envelopes, sometimes people put little love notes. They'll take a sticky and post it on there and put something in. Well, these machines are capable of recognizing that kind of stuff. And so they outsort them to other areas. And the other thing that happens is people will actually grab a green envelope for a 2012 election and put this year's ballot in that envelope. And so it'll catch those and outsort them. And so those get cured appropriately after that.
Right.
So, but the little love notes are cute. One of them had arrows pointing down to the signature area and said, "This means shit in Maricopa County." So the whole signature verification thing is one of the loose areas. I'm sorry, I've done actual signature verification with Shelby Bush's group, and you can't compare a signature. You can't even barely recognize half the signatures that they try to compare with.
Right.
Because they're done on an electronic pad that's got 60 dots per inch resolution. Right. And the signature, you can't see the facets. You can't
see what you're signing, right?
No. And so that's one of the problems. Okay. The other problem is mail-in ballots. Well, what happened to those 1.1 million ballots that went out? Did any of them find their way back into a Dropbox somewhere? I mean,
sure they did.
Not a Dropbox. I mean, those UPS Dropboxes.
Right.
Okay. So that's another thing. I mean, anybody can put a ballot in a box on the corner. and there's no verification other than the signature. That's
It's a free for all.
Yeah, it's a free for all. And if you look at the states that during COVID went to full mail in and have stayed that way, their elections have turned much more blue. The states that pulled back from that are turning more red. So it's common. I mean, it doesn't take
Common sense. Yeah.
It doesn't take a really bright thief to figure out what to do.
Right.
You got to get ballots somewhere, vote them the way you want, and then turn them in. So that's what I saw at Runback, and I don't fault Runback, but remember I talked about that machine being called a remittance processor. So I worked at some of the companies I did work for was like Kraft Food Service, Chase Bank, Microsoft, Nationwide, State Auto. I've done a lot of large company projects, typically multi-millions of dollars and lasting long periods of time, where what my expertise is business process reengineering. It's really a methodology of how you do that. But you walk into a company and you talk to them and you interview people and you ask what they do and how they do it, and you understand what are various important aspects along the way.
Right.
And then you re-engineer it to say, hey, if we did it this way, we could cut out that expense, or these people, we'd be able to do it faster. And therefore, at the end of the day, you have a less expensive and a faster system. So there's this whole Runback thing. I started to tell you that for this reason. Everything that takes place at MTech, it goes to Runback. After they take pictures of the signature, and it goes back to MTech, and they do their signature verification. Then they'll send a list over to Runback and say, pull these ballots for us. Yeah, it's the 27th one, the 30th one, the 59th one, because we've we've verified signatures, and now we're ready to process them. And they take them back out, and then they take them over to MTech, and MTech splits them open and pulls out and counts, runs it through a scanner. So if you draw that process out, I got to tell you, it's a heck of a lot more complicated than a hand count.
Right. Way more expensive. And they say that, these machines, they're so much more cost effective. It's the complete opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So that's kind of my fun little story of Runback. And
so what you would propose is just go back to the hand counted ballots.
Well, I would say that, and I'm not afraid to stand up and say that. And I'll tell you why. In February of last year, I retired, and I was planning to spend a lot of time in my wood shop and my toys that I've got there. I've got a lot of fun toys, and I bought some 3D printer and some new stuff.
Very cool.
And gardening. I love to garden in my backyard.
Great.
So I was planning to retire and spend my time there, but then in January of this year, God just put it on my heart that I need to run for the recorder's office. And I kind of went, recorders, why? Well, my technology background and experience maps to that technology, scanning and documents and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I actually have patents on indexing methods for scanning documents. And so that was why I just really felt that the Lord put that on my heart. So I said, okay. And then we started getting signatures, right? And man, did that seem like a mountain to climb. And we finally ended up getting past our required number. And then at the end there, the last 2 weeks or so, it was like watching the Red Sea part. I mean, people were bringing in, envelopes and signatures from all over the place. And we ended up with 7,324 signatures, which was, we needed 4,250. And so that was, we were close to double. We were way up there where we didn't expect to get there. But I equate that to the part about, remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
Yes.
Remember George, in the end, he was in trouble. He needed money.
Yes. The bank.
Yeah.
Right.
The bank. Right. Okay. And so people put out the call and people came out of the woodwork.
Right.
And here's this, and I got this, and I'm dumping my.
Did they know you? Did these people know you?
No, a lot of them did not. I mean, we had an army of people out there that were willing to take petitions around and get them signed, but the people that signed them really didn't know me. So it really was a very, very similar analogy. And so it was wonderful watching the Red Sea part. And now we're at the stage of our campaign where we need to raise some more money. And so now again, it's faith.
Well, I'll donate. I would happily donate
It's
when we're
faith.
done here.
You know, it's faith.
It is.
Because God called me. Who knows that you weren't saved for a reason like this? You know, after the plane crash. I didn't tell you about the plane crash yet, did I?
You told me a little bit before we
Yeah.
started, but I'd love, please.
So I was born in Douglas, Arizona. My dad worked at the smelter there, the copper smelter. And in the 60s, there was a lot of noise that the smelter was going to close. And so my dad and my mom decided they were going to go back to school and get their teaching degrees. And I was like 9 at this time, right? So we moved away from Douglas, and we ended up migrating to the valley so they could finish their degrees. Well, my dad was a pilot. I think I was weaned in an airplane, literally. He had a plane. He rebuilt a small plane when I was 2, and all during the time he had a plane for several years, and so I flew a lot. So when I was in high school, he got his instructor's permit and taught me how to fly. So I used to really enjoy it, and I'd take my high school buddies and we'd go out and we'd fly. It was a fun way to impress your friends. Yeah. So one of my friends that I took flying really liked it and got into it, and so he went off and did well, and he bought a plane, and he would fly it out here every year, and he'd visit his family every July for about 2 weeks. And so one of the years that he was going to do that, I said, hey, let's take our wives to Sedona for breakfast. I think pilots really need just a reason to go somewhere. So anyways, we made plans to do that. And did I tell you about, well, so that morning that I was going to go flying, at 4:00 in the morning, I had to get up extra early so that I could load data into an application that was going to be used for the very first physical canvas of the Arizona audit. And then
What year was this?
This was in 2020.
Okay.
No, 2021.
Okay, so recently.
It was July 30th or July 10th, 2021. And so then I finished that, and then I went to the airport, met my friend there, my wife and I. We got into the plane and went to take off, and something was wrong with the plane. And we ended up crashing at the end of the runway, just past the pavement. And we slid into the perimeter fence, and one of the posts hit the wing tank. And in 5 seconds, we had a 20-foot fireball in front of us. So then it was about, everybody surviving, right? And I'll tell you, I keep telling people this. If you ever put on any kind of an over-the-shoulder harness system, right, and you buckle it up, you want to wait 5 seconds and then learn how to take it off. You don't want to spend those 5 seconds trying to figure that out when there's a 20-foot fireball in front of you.
Good advice.
So that's what cost me some time in getting out of the plane. And I ended up with 4th-degree burns on my left leg, which means you don't have any skin. You're down into raw muscle and tendons. And I ended up with 3rd-degree burns on my arms and some on my face. And I ended up spending 6 months in the burn center and rehab facilities and different hospitals for different reasons. And it took me almost a good 10 months to learn to walk again. It was a pretty dramatic experience, of course. We all survived. My wife had some 3rd-degree burns on her shoulder. My buddy got some 2nd-degree burns. And his wife, we think she might have skinned her knee, but we're not sure. She was perfectly fine. But, the whole thing, I really believe that God uses the experiences in our life to build our character.
Yes.
And I would have never have imagined what that would have been like. But believe me, at this point, I can say I'm a survivor. And people say, well, how are you going to survive this political cesspool? You ain't got nothing on a plane crash. Trust me. So yeah, we survived
for the job.
But remember that 4:00 data thing, right? Well, a couple months after my accident, the application developer that wrote the app was killed in a suspicious hit and run accident. And then people started asking me, well, was your crash really a crash, an accident? And, I just tell people, well, I'm not going to really speculate on that because God saved me for a reason. Obviously, I'm still here. And I believe that he put it on my heart to run for this race. So it's just been a pure faith journey so far for us.
Incredible. Just absolutely incredible. And it's like, here you are. I mean, what can people do to get out and support you? What can people, can they go to your website and donate?
Yeah, of course. We have a website. It's Don Hiatt. My last name is spelled
Hiatt.
Hiatt. So it's Don Hiatt, the number 4 recorder.com. It's fairly simple to get to.
Should people follow you on social media?
Yeah. Well, I'm on Twitter. My handle there is SkyPilot2, SkyPilot TOO also. So I'm a Sky pilot.
Right.
So that's where that comes from. And then we also have a YouTube channel that we're going to be putting more links on different places on our website and stuff.
And if we can give you guests, people that you want to have on your show, me and Bill are pretty
cool,
well connected with some of the, some of the same people we do.
Yeah, cool.
I'm sure you'll be calling Swinnick up, right? Swinnick will be on there.
Well,
she's like a battery who never stops.
No kidding.
She's wonderful though. I love Swinnick.
I'm actually owe her some information right now, so
yeah,
I'm going to get that together probably tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. If you ever want to come back on, door's always open.
Awesome.
If you need some gold and silver, we'll take care of you.
I'm looking forward to that too.
Thank you very much, Don.
All right.
Pleasure. Thank you. All right. That's it. And we'll see you on the next episode. Adios.